Hello, everybody. Today is January 31st, 2025, and I thought that I would present a reading for the new year to all of you. Um, I want to thank everyone who participates in listening to this channel. It means a lot to me that I am able to share this practice with all of you. I may not know who you are or where you reside or what is happening directly in your life, but I feel the connection and it's meaningful to share my work, especially if I think it's helpful to others. And so I want to make this a gift for all of you. Uh, the new year is always a time both to reflect on the past, everything that has led up to this moment in time for all of us, and also to project, to imagine what it is that we might wish to attach our energy, intention, attention to. So it's this beautiful moment, these little portals or passageways, the liminal space between past and future. And so I thought I would consult the cards, consult source, see what would be most helpful for us to know, understand, do, how we might orient, what things would be good for us to understand about how we're going to move into this next year. And let's see what themes emerge. I am curious myself. So, my prayer is always to reveal the information that will be most helpful. And let's see what the cards have to say. So I'm going to go silent. I'm going to concentrate while I shuffle. Be with you momentarily. I'm just going to say a prayer over these cards. Yeah. Mm. Well, a lot of themes are coming up in this poll that very much relate to my area of study and practice. And really, the theme here is about the necessity of building relational connections with others and how important that is going to be moving forward into the new year. That this is a time more than ever that we are being called to really acknowledge and heal the wounded inner child so that we can partner with others in a good and equitable way. And that this is ultimately what we need to do to heal a lot of the shadow that has been really in our face for the last couple of years. I mean, this is a part of the human condition, part of human psychology, that there is always material that resides within the unconscious, and that life is sort of a process of revealing these things to us in our daily interactions in the material world. And if we're in a kind of practice that allows us to recognize those things or confront those things in ourselves, you know, Carl Jung, depth psychology acknowledges that there's a kind of integration that can happen when we are willing to do that kind of deep inner work. And but this is true not just for individuals, it's true for us as a collective whole. And so you can sort of think of it along these lines. That which we resist persists, or that which we disown, it comes back to bite us in a really big and loud way. And I think we're seeing a lot of that right now, um, politically, this fear of looking within, looking at where we are being dishonest or disingenuous in our own lives, where we fear acknowledging that in ourselves, where we're willing to take the easy way out instead of taking responsibility for our choices, for our own emotional states. And in my practice, um, when I'm working with clients, I think this is a subtle distinction that is often misunderstood. This idea, taking responsibility is not laying the blame entirely on yourself. In fact, I think this is something that programs of recovery often are the first time that people start to begin to understand this piece of seeing one's part, that anytime we are interacting with the world at large, specifically other people, we play a part in our perception of things, the actions that we take, the behaviors that arise in response to certain, feelings of being triggered. That it's not you can't take full responsibility for an interaction that arises amongst multiple people, but you can recognize that what you are bringing to the situation affects the dynamic as a whole. And so being able to see your part, this is part of recognizing one's own karma. Karma is this understanding that we live in a world that has a cause and effect relationship. When we choose to, or not choose even, when we take an action, any action, that there's a ripple effect. There are consequences that arise and formulate around every action that we take. And specifically, if we're taking a lot of actions out of unconscious, unresolved material, and that usually means something that was traumatic. It was too painful or uncomfortable to own uh, in our day-to-day psyche, and so it gets buried in the unconscious, right? And again, anything that we're shoving down, pushing away, setting aside, it's too painful. I don't want to look at it. It's ugly. It's dark. Um, it paints me in a negative light, and that negative light threatens to devour me, right? This is very much the most extreme example of this would be the narcissist, whose sense of self is so fragile, that their ego is so fragile and so contingent on what others think of them, that they cannot risk taking responsibility for any kind of negative associations or negative actions that they might take, and to acknowledge the consequences of those actions, because to do so would mean to completely decimate their sense of self. And so the um, protective measure, the protective behavior that arises in those situations is to blame everyone else, right? So instead of being able to take responsibility for one's part in things, everything must be disowned. Everything must be projected on the other. Everyone else is the enemy. Everybody else is responsible for the treachery of the world, and it is my job to punish them, to denigrate them. Again, this is sort of the outcome or the byproduct of deeply disowned material and this intensely fragile sense of self, which, is largely misunderstood as an attachment wound. You know, I've recently seen Mary Trump, who is the niece of the one who is in office. And she is a clinical psychologist. And she talks at length in her book and in these interviews about the origins of trauma within her family. And, narcissists beget narcissists because of this intense lack of attunement, lack of compassion, and how terribly damaging it is, specifically to the psyche of a child. But of course, children grow up into adults, and then they continue to perpetuate that kind of harm in their inability to care about other people's feelings, thoughts, interests, way of life. So much of what's coming up in this reading is this acknowledgement that we must be able to look within in order to heal these things within ourselves, within our society, that we have been avoiding, that is now too big, too loud, too intense to ignore anymore. We must, in fact, be willing to look within. This is where things stand presently, and this is the energy surrounding it. So the Two of Swords is having a peaceful heart as a result of quieting the mind. This is such a beautiful image here. So I want to really go into the imagery of this. First of all, it's important for us to know that swords relate to the mind, thoughts, ideas, communication. And when you're looking at this image, you can see that there is a kind of peacefulness, the gentle curve of the moon. We don't know if it is waxing or waning, but it is close to a new moon. So there is just enough illumination for us to look within, but we still are able to reside within the darkness. That's yin space, if we're going to look at it in terms of the Tao. If yang is the active outward force, yin is the dark internal force, that fertile soil in which things grow. Things must grow in the dark, whether it's a seed in the earth or a child in the womb. Things must grow in the dark. But we must be willing to go in and reflect and be with that material in order for it to grow well, in order for us to have insight into what might one day come into the world. We have to be with that material internally. She is meditating. The blindfold is symbolic of her turning her gaze inward instead of getting distracted with what's going on in the external world and allowing that to define who she is, what she thinks, how she feels. She is tracking that as activity that's happening in all these different sense spaces in order to bring insight into who she is, how she's operating, why she's making the choices that she's making, and being very still and watchful and mindful of this material. And you can even see there are just these tiny, subtle peaks on the water behind her. There are no great uh, catastrophic waves. She's noticing the energy of this activity in sense space and how it plays out on her reflective sense of self. But overall, this is a very peaceful kind of representation of being with what is arising and falling away internally. And we do this with the intention, or one might even say that the byproduct of this kind of deep self reflection is compassion. To know oneself is to know another. That if we are willing to be with all that is available to us in our understanding of being a human being, the pain, the suffering, the embarrassment, the disgust, the joy, the connection, the inspiration, the excitement, that this full spectrum of emotional expression, emotional experience. Again, to know oneself is to know the other, because truly we're not so different as we might think, right? Everyone wants to be loved and accepted by the people in their lives. Everyone wants to feel a sense of meaning and purpose. Everyone wants to feel safe in knowing that their material needs are going to be taken care of. These basic elements of being a human being are true for all of us. And so, the more we are willing and able to sit with our own interior, specifically the big and intense emotions, the better able we are to do that with others. If there's a lot of disowned material that resides within you, then it's very hard to be in the presence of somebody who's going through something that's similar. It brushes up against your own uh, dysregulated self. And then, this is often when behaviors get expressed that undermine the ability to be close, to be vulnerable, to offer ourselves freely, and to have that be received by others in a good way. So the Six of Cups is like loving before you've ever had your heart broken. It's loving with an unguarded heart. There's a kind of innocence to this, right? I mean, And you can see these are children. These are children who are having this moment of connection and recognition, a kind of sweet exchange of love and affection. And, presumably in some of our lives anyway, of course, this is not true for everyone, but presumably there is a time in life when before you've been battered and bruised, before you've been betrayed by those who were meant to care for you, where it feels safe to love in this way. And even more profoundly, once we've grown into adults and we have had our hearts broken, to get to a place where we're willing to love like this again, it shows that you've done a lot of this inner work. That this ability to be with ourselves allows us to be with others in this open and compassionate way. So, past energy that's brought us to this place in the present, again, it is saying that we've done a lot of this work, both individually and collectively. We do live in a time now because of technology, social media, the internet. Obviously there's a lot of shadow to that as well. But the benefits of that kind of information dissemination is that people have a lot of knowledge about attachment theory, about psychological modalities that can help them process trauma. you know, Not too many generations back, it was so stigmatized to seek help in the mental health field. You literally were considered crazy if you sought the assistance of a psychologist or a psychiatrist. That it was so taboo. And this is not so much the case anymore. There is so much information available to us, and so many people who are able to offer assistance in this way. And our desire to heal our hearts, to find emotional freedom, it's gotten us to this place where we actually can start to make headway in the way that we relate to others. And again, it starts with ourselves. Um, in Buddhism, there is a practice of meditation called metta, or loving kindness. And there's a very specific prescribed method in which to do this. One imagines themselves first receiving this uh, wisdom, or this intention of receiving loving kindness. There are variations, but it sort of goes like this. Imagine yourself and giving you these phrases. May I be safe and protected. May I be happy and peaceful. May I be healthy and strong. May I have ease of well-being and acceptance of all life's conditions. And you say these phrases to yourself. And you also feel what it feels like to receive these well wishes. Notice the kind of emanations of warmth, this feeling of calm, the stilling of the heartbeat. Notice what it feels like to receive these well wishes. And you do this practice for a period of time for yourself first. You put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you help the person next to you. But of course, that's not the end of the practice of loving kindness. Then you imagine someone in your life who you love dearly, right? It is easy to imagine yourself giving these phrases to that person, some loved one. It can even be a pet. And you're imagining, may you be safe and protected. May you be happy and peaceful. May you be healthy and strong. May you have ease of well-being and acceptance of all life's conditions. Frida just came out because she knows she's getting those phrases. And then you imagine giving it to somebody who is neutral, somebody that you don't even really know, right? You're the person at your local coffee shop that makes your coffee during the day. You know, some neutral person, and you envision them again, giving them these phrases. And then the final step is somebody who is difficult, somebody who invokes some feeling of distress in you, and you imagine giving them these phrases. Being able to be with emotions in this way, being able to cultivate compassion for oneself and slowly, bringing that to others out in the world. It is the necessary way to make these deeper connections, to have greater emotional intelligence. The Queen of Cups is one who feels her feelings deeply without being knocked off center by them. She's able to contact emotions inside herself that maybe at one time would cause her to be dysregulated, would cause her to act compulsively and maybe in a harmful way to herself and others. But as she grows accustomed to being with those emotions, of noticing that they arise, they peak, and then they fall away all on their own accord, and that she doesn't have to take an action to try to get rid of them or suppress them, that she's able to be with the wave-like pattern of these emotional experiences, then she's able to choose how she wishes to respond rather than reacting. And because we've made a practice of this within ourselves and out in the world, we're coming to a place where we're able to act more mindfully, to cultivate this kind of compassion out in the world, both in our personal relationships and hopefully as a society at whole. So, the deeper soul lessons that are coming up as a result of being in this place in the present, again, we have this reiteration that contemplation, stillness of the mind, meditation, being reflective in our repose, that is what the Four of Swords is about. This is just this very loud and definitive message of this is a good time for us to meditate as we go into this new year. To really imagine and maybe intentionally invoke a vision for what we wish life to look like moving forward. What is an ideal vision for our world today? Because this is an essential part. We can't begin to move towards a new way of being until we're able to envision it in the mind's eye. Before you build a house, you first have to draw up a plan. You have to imagine what you would like that construction to look like. And so this is a time for us to reflect on what our ideal vision, based on true insight, based on truth, what that might look like. Aces represent the highest octave of an energy. It is like getting a divine download from the universe. And so you can think of the Ace of Swords as these flashes of insight that come because we are creating an appropriate environment for them to come through. When we're not in active rumination and obsession, when we're able to watch our thoughts from a dispassionate place, these sparks of insight can come through fully formed. And so, for those of you who are willing and able, take some time in this moment before we enter the new year to vision. What would you like life to look and feel like for yourself and others? And then moving forward, this is an interesting card to come up in this placement, but just in general too. Again, we're being asked to be self-reflective on how we are showing up to situations in our own life. The way that I usually describe the Seven of Swords is it's kind of like people pleasing, analyzing the way you think others want you to be and sort of contorting yourself to fit within that framework, or censoring what you really think or feel because you're trying to manage and control how others are going to perceive you. Um, and ultimately, what the Seven of Swords is saying is that you may think that you're avoiding conflict by showing up this way in your relationships with others, but ultimately, again, remember, anything that we disown, anything that we choose to uh, disregard, it doesn't go away. It needs to be acknowledged and expressed. Obviously, there are skillful ways of talking about things that are difficult. I think it's quite clear that, relationships with other people result in conflict at times. I don't think that that is something one can avoid. So it's not that we need to avoid having ruptures with people, but we must become skillful at learning how to repair. So being honest with what is happening inside of ourselves, acknowledging how our own behaviors affect other people, being able to talk about that in an honest and forthright way, always with the intention of coming to an agreement about how we can honor one another's truth without erasing it for someone else, right? How can we negotiate these things in an honest, clear, forthright way without using our thoughts and words like a weapon, either on ourselves or another person? And so the other thing that we're being called to really imagine is how we can give space in our lives to our own autonomy, our own authority, our ability to govern our lives the way we wish them to go, to, assume the throne in our own lives, which again requires taking a lot of responsibility for our actions, our dreams, our desires, and learning to be in right action. The shadow side of the emperor is the tyrant, one who is imposing themselves on everyone else without any kind of uh, compassion or awareness. But I do believe that we're being called to come into our own power, and not at the expense of our relationships with others in community. That these two things need to be brought into balance. It's not either or, it's and both, right? Of course, the lovers is about unity and wholeness. It is about an equal exchange of giving and receiving, the ability to assert ourselves and also to receive and be with insight. So, in order to do this, again, it behooves us to be self-reflective. Where am I out of balance? It is generally the truth for all of us that we are more oriented towards one of those ways of being than another. Like there are those of us who feel very passive and timid, and it's so much easier to sort of be an observer and wait and see, and not to assert ourselves too much. And in that case, in your self-reflection, you might be the person who needs to work a little bit more in order to take right action, in order to be more bold in your externalization of action. But if you're the person who's always taking charge, always, taking action in a compulsive way, for you, the equal and opposite energy in order to come into a greater state of balance might be to pause when agitated, to not take the first action that comes to mind, but to hold steady and be reflective. Watch what emotions arise. Notice the narrative that arises in conjunction with the emotion. And allow yourself to settle before you decide to take an action. Again, and this is a spectrum. All of this is occurring for each one of us on a continuum, and it's in constant flux. And this is, of course, why it's so important for us to be self-reflective, to have a practice of looking inward, to know who we are and how we respond to different people in different situations. But again, what I believe we're being called to point to in our lives, personally and collectively, is true love. That there is this strong emphasis on relational connection, healing our relationships out there in community and also in our personal lives. I love this image too. Look at this couple. And again, like don't get hung up on the gender, right? In fact, really tarot is a symbolic language. And so it most often these images or these messages, they're not meant to be taken literally. There is often this expression of masculine and feminine within the tarot. And masculine and feminine energy within this system is much more akin to the Tao. Again, it's less related to gender and it's more about the archetypal quality of that energy. The feminine is receptive, it's yin, it's the dark half of the year, it's the reflective, it's the womb. The masculine energy is the assertion of will. It's an externalization of force, which creates a material outcome. So one without the other is impotent. We need both of these energies in order to create new life. And so, what I like about this image is that these two figures are facing one another directly. They're looking into each other's eyes. They are not averting their gaze. They are not turning away. They are ready to see who the other is and to take that in and to be seen themselves. They are mutually exchanging their heart. Cups are love, emotions, intuition. They represent matters of the heart. This is an exchange of deep emotional expression. And so the overview is this. Look at all this page energy. This is significant. The Page of Cups, the Page of Wands, the Page of Pentacles. So pages represent new beginnings, new opportunities, new people, and they are childlike in the best possible way. This is a message of acknowledging that inside of each of us is a child, and that child is the keeper of our creativity, our ability to be present in the moment and respond to what is arising in your life in an authentic and immediate way. The way that children live in the world. Children are not dragging all their baggage from the past because they don't have a past. They're also not stuck on some preconceived idea of the way things should be. They just don't have that context. They haven't lived enough of life in order to have internalized these expectations yet. They show up in the world and they respond to things with this open curiosity. They explore. And especially in accordance with attachment theory, when a child feels safe, they are a lot more apt to explore their environment. If they are frightened, if there are threats present, they can't risk the energy that it would take to become dysregulated in the event that something goes awry. They they won't do it. They don't explore as readily. So this emphasis on healing ourselves, and developing a relationship with the inner child so that we can love in this open-hearted way, so that we can channel our creative energy into making things in the world, materializing things in the world that meet our needs in a good way. And again, just the emphasis should be on noticing the parts of ourselves that come up um, in times of difficulty, like fear of financial insecurity. You're worried about, the stability of your job. And you can feel that tension in your stomach, that manifestation of fear that is a somatic experience of pain or nausea in the stomach, a fluttering in the stomach, a contraction in the stomach. If you can go and identify that and be with it and assign it a form, I often, when I'm going to those places within myself, I think about this scared child. I'm not going to have enough. I'm not going to be taken care of. And I imagine what that child might need in order to feel safe. To hold that child in my imagination, to hold that part of me that's feeling so activated, so frightened, and just to offer it comfort and soothing. And once I'm able to come back into this state of regulation, then it's just easier to take right action out in the world. And so there is just this strong emphasis. Again, these are cards that I very much associate with attachment wounding. This one in particular, well, actually, both of these have been coming up on a pretty regular basis. As you might know, those of you who listen regularly, it's interesting. It's interesting to see what cards come up over and over again. That this message is one that is playing out over an extended period of time. And I write about both of these cards in my thesis. This one in particular is such a quintessential uh, visual representation of an attachment wound. The feelings that arise when our needs aren't met in a good enough way. We feel like we're alone in the world, that there's no one here to help, that we are in exile. We have been cast out in the cold, and that these wounds that we've incurred keep us from being accepted into the world. And yet, the other thing that's really important to acknowledge in this image is that there is this representation of generosity, of material manifestation of getting needs met. You know, again, don't take it too literally, right? It's a church, it's a stained glass window, but it doesn't mean that you have to be of a certain faith. It's just this representation of a community that congregates for the sake of doing good works in the world. Let's think of it in a very general way. And then we look at our figures here, these orphans that are alone in the snow, and they walk right on by. They don't see that this is a resource that's available to them. even though the lights are on, the doors are open. They are welcome to come inside and avail themselves of everything they need in order to thrive. But if we can't see that those opportunities exist for us, then we can't begin to take advantage of them. And this is something that the attachment research really shows in a strong way. That when we grow up in households where we don't get our needs met, where we cry and cry and cry and no one comes, we internalize this sense that the world is a withholding, treacherous place. We don't try anymore. We don't try to get our needs met. We find other ways of suppressing awareness of that deep and intense pain. And it affects our metacognition. It affects our ability to see things clearly, to have a clear narrative about what is true for us in life. And we see everything through the lens of deprivation. That's really what the Five of Pentacles is representing. It is our job to heal the inner child, to begin to take advantage of the resources, to even start to tune into the resources before you can take advantage of it. You have to see it. So start to tuning your attention towards those that are loving, right? Go where the love is. If you find yourself in relationships that are often withholding, start tuning in to the people who are excited to spend time with you, who actually put forth energy and effort to make plans and follow through on those plans. Go where the love is. And slowly, 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 we start to bring a new vision, a new way of seeing ourselves and the world at large into being. The moon, too, I very much associate with early childhood wounding because in early childhood, when attachment is being formed, we are operating entirely out of the unconscious. We do not have this cognitive or narrative sense of self. That doesn't happen until around the age of 3 or 4 when we start to acquire language. So prior to that, we experience the world through feelings. We experience the world somatically, that this is a deeply unconscious experience of the world. And again, if you are not getting your needs met in a good enough way at this time in life, we internalize this as a felt sense of ourselves and the world at large. And this affects our vision, and our vision affects our experience, right? So again, if you expect people to be cruel to you, that's what feels familiar, and you start orienting as you grow into an adult, you orient yourself towards that which feels familiar. So it is like, you know, an incredibly painful lesson that growing up with abuse, you often choose abusers in adulthood. And part of the process of healing is to understand that that's how we're built as human beings. But that also doesn't mean that you have to accept that for the rest of your life. That there is work that can be done in order to heal these parts within ourselves that are oriented in this way and start to update those models. So if you have insecure attachment, you can develop earned security by, there are multiple ways. I learned a method through my mentor, Dan Brown, and his colleagues called Ideal Parent Figure Protocol, which is a kind of visualization, a method of repairing those old models of attachment. But there are a lot of ways to do it. There's inner child work, there's working somatically and processing the trauma, there's narrative therapy. There's so many different ways now that a person can heal these wounded, exiled parts and start to come into an expression of the healed child. The sun is this perfect, beautiful representation of bringing unconscious material up into conscious awareness for the sake of integration and healing, of being able to take that which resides in the shadows and shine the light of truth into it. And the truth is the truth about who we are, what makes us our own unique expression. The sun is shining your light so brightly that all who satellite you want to bask in your glow. And look at our little child here. This is a child who clearly feels safe, safe to express. This is a beautiful expression of shine, of being, of warmth and joy and experiencing what it's like to get your needs met in the best possible way. That is such a, the sun is really the celebrity card, being seen and being celebrated. And it is possible for us all to have this experience, to heal the karmic wound, to see what actions we've taken in the past as collective human beings, see what hasn't worked, what isn't working, and to consciously choose to do things differently so that everyone, everywhere can get their needs met in the best possible way. So that is my message for all of us going into 2026. I hope something that came through in that message was helpful to you. And I want to just take this moment to send you all the blessings in the world, all the love in the world, and to take that with you into this new year. Take care.